A good Erev Shabbos. So the topic today is Haschalas Gemara. How do we introduce our students to learning Gemara and give them the right foundation that's going to last with them and carry them through hopefully many happy, wonderful years of learning Gemara. So the first thing we have to understand is, what are some of the challenges and some of the, dare I say, obstacles that can get in the way of the Talmidim loving Gemara, learning Gemara, and succeeding at Gemara? What is there about Gemara that separates it from so many of the other limudim that the Talmidim can struggle? So first of all, what is it? So many of our Talmidim, if we called them into the room and said, "Are you learning Gemara?" "Yeah." "What's Gemara?" I don't know. So what's the big deal? I don't know what Gemara is. Well, that speaks to motivation. If a kid doesn't understand what is Gemara, what separates it, what's unique about it, then he very likely has difficulty with how it works and what its purpose is, and then there's going to be a lack of motivation. Secondly, for many kids, the first time they learn Gemara, that's going to be the first time they're expected to learn a limud without nekudos in their sefer. When they learn Chumash, it has nekudos. Maybe they had some exposure to Rashi without nekudos, maybe not. But Mishnayos, nowadays, everybody has nekudos. Gemara, very often, kids for the very first time, they're learning without nekudos. It's a brand new language. Everything they've learned till now has been Hebrew, Lashon Kodesh, Ivrit, however you want to refer to it. But in some way or another, it's been Hebrew. And you learn Gemara, and so much of it is Aramaic. So that's a new obstacle. And the kids can get frustrated. I just got used to this whole Hebrew thing, right? I got it. I'm starting to pick. I have a Sharashim list I know. I know Binyanim, I know Dikduk. It's coming together. And now I have to deal with, B'mai Kamifligi, right? It just doesn't work with the system that I know. And then there are the endless homogeneous pages. In Chumash, every 12 words, there's a colon. It's a new pasuk. There's Aleph, Beis, Gimel. In Mishnayos, so sometimes they're long and sometimes they're short. And before we start a Mishnah, Mishnah Vav is so long, right? Or, Mishnah Zayin is tiny. But there are units, there are individual units. So a kid looks at it, he says, okay, this is what I have in front of me, this is what we're going to do. Good. Gemara, it's like, and you turn the page, and the only kind of real division there are, every now and then you have a two dots, right? You have a colon, where it just became known in yeshiva world as a two dots. And so you have your two dots, but aside from that, you have to wait till the next Mishnah, and that could be like, 18 and a half daf. And kids are looking so like, it's just more and more. And when you start learning Gemara, you don't even say, we're learning Gemara Yud Gimel. You say Viter in the Gemara, right? Or the ever popular Viter in Shas. And to an 11, 12, 13-year-old, Viter in Shas means, okay, so we're really not getting anywhere anyway. So that's definitely a challenge. Then there's, of course, the abstract logic, which is brand new. Chumash, very concrete. Mishnayos, very concrete. Gemara, you're starting to prove things. You're starting to analyze things. You're starting to have to think in ways that you never had to think before. So that definitely is a challenge, and that's definitely something the kids had to get used to. And then, very often, there's a lack of clarity. And that can come from all the other things mentioned before, but it's so easy to go through a day, a week, a month of Gemara and never really have anything clear. There was a lot of back and forth. He was saying, a lot of hands moving, a lot of, but in the end of the day, it's not really clear. There was a lot of stuff. What did we say? I'm not really sure. And that builds incredible frustration, right? When you're sitting there for an hour and a half in class, right? And you have to sit there, whatever the classroom rules are, but you're not even getting anything clear. It's very frustrating. So it's easy to have Talmidim who end up frustrated. So in the next hour, Right? Haskalas Gemara is one of those things that we could talk about for a month or two. But in the next hour, we're going to try to address some of these challenges and discover ways that we can overcome them, discover ways that we can make the Gemara accessible and enjoyable. And I'm going to say that if Gemara is taught right, particularly Haskalas Gemara, it can be the most exciting, enjoyable, clear, gishmak alim the kids have. So the first issue we brought up is, what is it? Kids don't know what Gemara is. And there's a very simple solution to that. And that is, teach the background of Gemara. Teach the kids what is Gemara. Right? And there's two components to that. You want to teach the kids the historical background of the Gemara, meaning, how did it come to be? What is it b'mitzius? What is this thing called Gemara? Right? Is it another sefer in Chumash? Right? What is it? How does it compare to the other things I know? And then you want to give them a little conceptual background of how it works before you even start. This is something I do in my class about a month before we start Gemara. We start Gemara in right after midwinter break. Shortly after Hanukkah, we start what we call Introduction to Gemara. And it's about 9 lessons. And half of it is the history of Gemara. And this is lesson 1. And this is part of the new curriculum which we've just published, but the idea is really independent. Lesson 1 starts, well, where does Gemara come from? It comes from Har Sinai, of course. Right? Hashem gave Moshe all the Torah on Har Sinai. But it was divided up. There were the psukim, then there were the halachos, and then there was the background to the halachos. There were the drushes of how the halachos are learned out of the psukim. What's the rationale for various halachos, and how can you apply these rules to other rules? Right? And lessons 1, 2, 3, 4 go through the fact that first only the psukim were written. Then the halachos had to be written, and that was called mishnayos. And then what I call the underlying principles of halachos had to be written, and that's what we refer to as Gemara. And of course, I just said it all in 2 or 3 sentences. Obviously, there's much to elaborate on, and to elaborate on that, like I said, in my classroom we do about 4 or 5, I think 4 lessons on this topic. You're going to teach them the background of Gemara. Take a minute, an hour, whatever it is, teach them how to find the right daf and the right amud. You're going to be surprised if you took a survey of 7th or 8th graders, or any kids who've been learning Gemara for 2, 3 years. You're going to find in every class a few boys who are not really sure how to turn to daf mem vav amud beis. What does that mean? How do I get there? And they're looking over at their friends to see where is he open to. Oh, page 74? Okay, right? There's nothing wrong with teaching a lesson. Well, it's 20 minutes, it's a half hour. Teach them. This is an amud. This is a daf. It's written on the top of Amud Aleph. The back of that same page is the Amud Beis. V'chohein. Then you want to teach the conceptual background of Gemara. How Gemara works, what are the mechanics, right? So here's a sample lesson. This is lesson 6 of Introduction to Gemara. And again, I'm showing, the pages from our workbook, our curriculum, but the idea is really an independent idea. The fact that we're going to have logical debates and arguments with proofs and kashas back and forth, start laying the groundwork before you started so they have an understanding of what they're about to get into. This top paragraph, I'll read it out loud. David asked his brother Chaim, "Do you know what mommy is making for supper?" Chaim answered, "We're having hamburgers. I know this because I saw mommy take some ground beef out of the freezer this morning." "Well," responded David, "that doesn't mean anything. Maybe we'll be having meatballs." Chaim ended all doubt when he said, "That's true, but she also went to the store and bought hamburger buns." And then we take that paragraph, that debate, that argument, that discussion, and say, okay, how many pieces of this discussion can you find? And we come out with 5. There was a she'ela, a question asking for information. What are we having for supper? A teretz, or a tshuva, a response to that question. Right? We're having hamburgers. But then there was a raya. I know that we're having hamburgers because the ground beef came out of the freezer. But then there was a dechia. Your raya is not really a raya because ground beef could be used for something else. And then, of course, there was a final raya. I saw the hamburger buns. Right? And just teach it to the kid. And it's very non-threatening. And you say, that's how Gemara is going to work. There's going to be a statement made, and then there's going to be proofs to it. There's going to be kashas against it, debate, and either we'll agree with it at the end, we won't agree with it at the end. So even before they started, it's, okay, so this is what Gemara is. This is what Gemara is. It's the background, it's the underlying principles of the halachos, and this is the way it's going to debate. And again, we have a few lessons going in, so by the time the kids open their Gemaras, it's not a mystery what I'm going to find here, right? I have an idea. All right, so the next obstacle, the next challenge we brought up is the fact that you have to read without nekudos, which is very difficult. This is the easiest problem to solve. Use a Gemara with nekudos. Baruch Hashem, we live in an age when these are readily available. I listed a couple of the companies who are printing them, Tuvyas and Oz V'Hadar, and there may be more, I don't know. There's so much new. There are so many new skills that the kids have to learn when they're starting Gemara. How to think, how to teach Aramaic. The skill of reading without nekudos is valuable, but that could wait for another time. If they learn a year or two with nekudos, get a little bit comfortable with Gemara, and then 2 years down the line, okay, we're going to transition now to no nekudos, it's a much more sensible, educationally sensible way to do it, right? So that's, like I said, it's the easiest problem to solve. Problem of no nekudos, get nekudos. All our problems should be that simple. Is there anything online? I don't know. But, I know in our yeshiva, for the first couple of years, I'm not sure exactly which grade we transition out, but the Svarim list, when they're told to get Gemaras, it says, get the Tuvya's edition, with nekudos. And that's what they all have. At some point, they develop the skill of reading without nekudos, but not when you're first starting. Baruch Hashem is a few years, Haskalas Gemara, we think about it, 5th grade, whatever that first year is that you start Gemara, but Haskalas Gemara is really several years. 8th graders who've been doing Gemara for 3 years, they're still doing Haskalas Gemara. They're still getting Gemara skills as opposed to just increasing the amount of Gemara they know. So there'll be time for that skill at a later point. All right, there's a new language. It's Aramaic. It's not Hebrew. I don't know how to speak Aramaic. So there's no great chidushim here, but you have to start building vocabulary. And the way I like to do that is with a concurrent vocabulary curriculum. It's almost like a second limud. We have Gemara, and we have Gemara Milim. It's two separate things, but they intersect. The Gemara Milim that we're going to learn are always going to be from the Gemara you're going to have in the next couple of days. So by the time you get to a new word in Gemara, a new common Gemara word, this was your Gemara vocabulary word from 2-3 days ago. When the kids get to that Gemara and they're trying to understand the Gemara, this new word is not something that they're also trying to do at the same time, right? This common word, I'm not saying, by the way, this is a very common Gemara word. Don't forget the word hacha means here. At the same time, I want you to understand the raya that's going on here. In recent years, psychologists have come to the conclusion that multitasking is a myth. There is no such thing as multitasking. Our brains can do exactly one thing at a time. And, they used to say women were better at it than men. I don't know. But the current wisdom is that there's no such thing as multitasking. If you're doing two things at the same time, your attention is shifting back and forth from one to the other. So if the kids are trying to develop their vocabulary at the same time as they're trying to understand, then they're not fully focused on either one. So you have to teach Gemara you teach the vocabulary as a separate limud, right? And the best, when a kid gets a list of 20 Gemara Milim, it's a nightmare, right? The best way that I've found, you teach 2 words at a time. Any given day, 3 times a week, I teach 2 new words. Maybe there'll be a total of 8 or 10 words in the week maximum, but it's 2 a day. If once or twice in the year, it'll be 4 in the day. But you teach 2 words is easy, right? Spend the next 5 minutes learning these 2 words, and by learning them, you're going to make your own flashcards, right? And I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. You're going to make your own index cards, flashcards. Then you're going to learn these 2, and then you're going to review all the words you know from the beginning. Right? So you're going to start, so after you've learned 36 words, you're going to, 35 and 36, you'll master them, you'll know them, and then spend the next 7 minutes on the clock reviewing 1 through 36. Now, by the time you got to 36, and you've done this every time, 1 through 20 are in the bag. Right? They're a joke. But then every 20 words, there's going to be a test going back to the beginning. So there'll be 1 through 20, 1 through 40, 1 through 60. But those first 40 words, those 60 words, by the time you're getting to 80, it's nothing. And it was just 2 new words every day. And there'll be games and contests throughout. Every day there'll be some kind of review, some kind of game. And you can be creative however you like to do it, whatever systems work in your classroom. By the end of the year, I give a test on 1 through 100. 100 Gemara Milim, and every single word is on the test. And Rabbi say I'm going to be made that Bali Guzma, most years, more than half the class get 100 on that test. More than half the class get 100 on that test. And I would say 90% get over a 90. Right? And that means they're moving on to their second year of Gemara with 90 to 100 common Gemara words in their pocket. If they got nothing else during the year, then that alone is, how valuable is that? To go into your second year of Gemara with 90 words in your pocket. Okay? Now, when you teach Gemara Milim, don't forget the jargon. Don't forget those words that aren't really in the Gemara, but Shakla V'Tarya. Okay, Rabbi say Chazer over the Shakla V'Tarya. Do you think there are any kids who are 2 years into Gemara and still don't really know what Shakla V'Tarya means? You think so? Yeah. Teach Shakla V'Tarya. Right? You're going to talk about a sugya, new sugya, this sugya. Spend a minute. One of your 100 Gemara Milim, or however many words you're going to do, should be the word sugya. Right? It's so pashut. Of course, everybody knows what a sugya, but not everybody does. So you got to include jargon. How do I teach sugya? So interesting you asked. This year I changed it. I used to teach it a topic of discussion in the Gemara. I changed it to this year to a discussion in the Gemara about a particular topic. Okay, and the kids know that taich. Discussion in the Gemara about a particular topic. But that's it. They have it. No kid in my class is not going to be sure what his Rebbe means. We're starting a new sugya.
Once a kid in 7th grade, his Rebbe was using the word chiddush in every other sentence for months, and the kid wasn't getting anything. Finally, they figured out the only word he didn't know was a chiddush.
Unfortunately, that's not a chiddush.
Why just 2 words a day? Why not like 5, 10? If I'm going to apply the word also, or just memorizing the meaning?
Well, we're going to apply them in 2 days when those words appear in the Gemara. But why not 5 or 10? Because a kid's attitude to 5 or 10 new vocabulary words and a kid's attitude to 2 new Gemara vocabulary words is totally different. 2 words is easy. I don't want the kids to look at this as a mountain and cram it in and not really know it. You teach 2 new words a day and then go back and chazer all the rest. You may end up with fewer words over the course of the year. Like I said, 100, which is still nothing to sneeze at. But I can tell you that whenever the kids in the 7th and 8th grade know, whenever they come into my class for something, to give me something, whatever, if you walk into my class, you're going to be asked whatever Gemara vocabulary word, ilmole. And Rubam Kikulam can say, if it was to be, right? Because it's so manageable, right? 5 or 10 words is an avoda. 2 words is not. 2 words is easy.
You could always add a club after class for an extra 5 words a week.
You could. But sometimes less is more. That's, and if you do 100 words in 5th grade, and 100 words in 6th grade, and 100 words, so if by the time they graduate 8th grade, they have 400 words, and they know them, right? Whereas when you had 20 words at a time, you memorized it for the test, and then it's gone, right? That's the mitzias. But like this, it's not gone because it's incorporated into your knowledge base. And they're 2 years older, and yeah, and I do 100 in half a year. Mustama, you're working a whole year, yeah. So I love the self-made flashcards. I have the kids bring in index cards with a box, and the index cards have lines on one side and they're blank on another side. We do, like I said, the constant review in games. And here, and there's incentives. So my incentives are that the test at the end of the year on 100 words, you get a gift certificate to Tuvia's. Right? We're in Muncie, so Tuvia's is the place. And if you get, every point over 80 is 50 cents, every point over 90 is $1, and you get 100, it's an $18 gift certificate. It's gewaldig. It costs a few $100s at the end of the year. I get a sponsor, and it's wonderful. And the kids really are motivated. And when the incentive is a sefer or something like that, matov manoim. Something I do that I really love is on the last day of the year, we finished all the Gemara we're going to learn this year. We've already had our test on 1 through 100. They've all gotten back their papers, 100, 99, 98, 92, right? Then I go to my shelf. We do Tfilas HaShachar. The next year they're going to learn Eila Metzias. I take above Metzia off my shelf, and I open up to the first Amud of Eila Metzias. And I say, boys, I am going to do nothing but read the words that you're going to start next year. Every time we come to a word that you can touch, raise your hand. And it's an amazing thing, right? Hacha, right? Whatever the words are in the first Amud. Every line, there's 2 or 3 words. It's like almost a third of the words that they can already touch. I say, guys, you got it. You starting the year next year? When you started this year, you didn't know anything. But now, just forgetting all the chokhmah that you know, forgetting all the tochen, forgetting the skills that you have in shakla v'tarya, stam, the vocabulary, you guys already know a third of the first Amud you're going to learn next year. And that's an incredible feeling, right? And they taka do. The next year, the Rebbe is not teaching all these basic words anymore. The kids know them. So here, like I mentioned, the self-made flashcards, I put this on the board. I use PowerPoint in the classroom, so I'll put this on the board, and it'll be right after they finish davening. This goes up on the board. As I say, boys, you know what to do. Those are the instructions. Boys, you know what to do. And immediately they're running to get their vocabulary words, and they're the boxes, and this is going to be on the blank side, this is going to be on the line side, and they write it, and then right away they're testing each other. Now, some of the boys like to work themselves. So you have the flashcards, they can test themselves. I'm looking at the Hebrew, or the Aramaic, whatever language the word may be, and then I say it, I flip it over. Some kids like to, and some kids will make games with each other. And one boy will ask the word, and there's 2 boys standing on each side of the desk, and whoever banks first gets to answer. They'll all be creative, they'll all do it in their own way. And then these boys are in the corner making up songs about the words, right? A lot of Rabbi like to make songs. And that's great. I let the boys do it, and they make chants, and they make songs, and they all do it in whatever creative, happy way they do. And that's 7 minutes in the beginning of the day. They master these 100 words, they have them in their pocket, and they move on. So what happened? Oh, the question was, what happens if a boy loses his flashcards? So if a boy loses his flashcards, what's going to happen is he's going to rewrite them, because those flashcards were precious. I don't have to say, you have to rewrite them, right? First of all, they don't lose their cards. If I would give it to them, if I would print them out and give it to them, it'd be gone. But these were handmade. These are my key. This is my hatzlacha, right? Their cards are precious, and they have their own boxes with their names on it, and they really take the time to write it meticulously. It's important to them. So I can't remember, in the 10 years I'm doing this, I can't remember how many times a boy lost his flashcards. But if they would, they would rewrite it. And sometimes I'll tell you, after the first 20 cards, this happens to me every couple of years. I have 1 or 2 boys who do this. Rabbi, I'm not so happy with it. I want to write my cards more neatly. And on their own, they'll just rewrite them anyway. The cards are precious to them. I mean, this is, kosvim maluach libecha. This is mamish, they love their cards. When we do a contest and I need to borrow someone's cards to quiz the class, right? The biggest covet is Rebbe's going to use my cards to quiz the class. I have a kickball game I do. There's 5 different teams. When your team is up, if you answer the question, you get the bet. If you answer the question, you get the field. Whatever. It's a whole lebedika chachma. And, right? So I'm standing outside. If I'm using your cards, it's a stoltz. So their cards are precious. So that's the best thing I could say. Right? So here's a couple of words. These are not words you're going to find in the Gemara, but these are words you need to know if you're going to learn Gemara. You have to know what an amud is. You have to know what a daf is. And you see, daf, and I put blot in Yiddish. I'm not the biggest Yiddish guy around, but this is a word they're going to hear. They're going to hear somebody referring to how many blot did you do in class this year. They have to know what a blot is. They may never hear me referring to it. I'm never going to say, okay, we finished a blot. I'm going to say we finished a daf. But since they're going to hear the word blot, they need to know it. It needs to be part of their vocabulary. And then here's just some very common words. Hacha, hasam, right? And there are 5 of these words. There's hacha, heichi, hasam, heicha. And which one did I leave out? Hachi, heichi. Whichever one it was, right? There are 5 of these words. 4 of them are heichaf, and then there's hasam. And every year the boys come up with different mnemonic devices, right? And I say hasam has a tough in it, and it's the only one that starts with a T, whatever it is. And the kids are very creative with the mnemonic devices and the chants, and I let them do all that stuff because they're better at than me. So and it works. And then these 2, when I put them on the board, before they go up on the board, all right, guys, today's words. Oh boy, Rabbi got you right where he wants you. Aha. Oh no, right? And it's exciting. It's a whole game. Like, oh my God, how am I supposed to know these 2, right? Because they're so similar. And it just makes the whole thing, it's so lebedik, it's so engaging. The kids are, when Rebbe's doing that, the Gemara Milam, I have you right where I want today. It's not, okay, 2 more words. It's engaging. All right, so that's vocabulary. That's the way we deal with the fact that it's a new language. The next challenge that we identified was the endless homogeneous pages. And this is huge. This is huge. How many times do you see a 5th grader or a 6th grader, Haskalas Gemara, and the pages are ripped and crinkled, and you ask them, where are you holding? I don't know, and they never know where the place is. You know what? For a 5th grader, I'm going to show you in a minute. So the best thing to do is break it down. There are no natural divisions like Sukkim and Mishnayos. So it is up to us to divide the Gemara into shiurim and lessons. Let me show you what I mean. This is only the bottom half of the Amud. But you're taking a 5th grader or a 6th grader, and you're saying, okay, this is what we're learning now. And this is what he's looking at. It's dizzying. What are we learning? Where are we learning? It's line 17, or the 4th medium-sized line, the 2nd word. And he's counting down, and some of us make the kids number the lines in the margin. Okay, this is where we're holding. And of course, his attention wanders for 2 minutes, and now he doesn't have the place. So now, he's got to refine the place on this Amud. Right? And if you're not used to it, and you can't quickly scan the words, it's dizzying. It's incredibly difficult. And this is something we may not give enough chashivas to. But an Amud of Gemara is so complex. Besides the fact that you have Rashi, you have Tosafos, or Shas, Torah, or there's so much going on the page, and then you have all these different sized lines. L'man Hashem, most kids, how are they going to keep the place? Besides the fact they're looking at it, what are we doing today? The whole thing? Compare that to this. If a kid is coming in the beginning of the day, and Rebbe has this on the board, Rabbi say, today we're learning Shir Tez Zayin. So first of all, there's a unit. There's a natural division. Today we're learning Shir Tez Zayin, lesson 16. Right? And of course, that's this Shir, this lesson is my own creation. I decided where it started and where it stopped, and the kids know that. But I've given them a unit. I've given them an amount that we're going to cover, and I cut it out for them, visually. And I say, you could follow in your Gemara, or you could follow with Rebbe on the board. Right? And 90% follow on the board. There are some who look in the Gemara, matov manoim. When they're going to chazer with the chavrusas, then I'm directing them to go in their Gemara. So they're starting to build that skill of being able to visualize a piece of Gemara within a full Amud. But when they're first learning it, and I'm trying to give in brand new concepts and brand new words, they don't also have to have their mind trying to cut out the piece of Gemara. I find this to be incredibly valuable.
Is this according to Tzura Sadaf? You just have to type out.
This is according to the Tzura Sadaf.
So it's like a visual. It's a Xerox of the Tuvia.
This is
You just retype it yourself.
No, I did not retype it. This is, Tuvia, he was kind enough to supply us with the PDFs of his Gemara for the sake of the workbook. So I happened to have it. Before I had that, I just took the Gemara and I put it on a scanner. And I just cut and paste around the different units. But if a Rebbe is a little more old-fashioned, no reason you can't photocopy it and take a scissor and cut it out. Right? And there's a lot of ways to do this, depending on your technological savviness. one of the Rabbi in our yeshiva, he just types it out and it doesn't have the Tzuras Hadaf anymore. And that's fine. I think there's a milah to keeping the Tzuras Hadaf because that's how they're going to see it. It builds that skill of being able to visualize it on the page, right? But this line here is the end of an amud. And these two words start the next amud. And I point that out to them, right? So I think there is a milah to keeping the Tzuras Hadaf.
One thing I do is I highlight part of the Gemara, keep the Tzuras Hadaf, and hand out that page to the kids. So the next few lines, you get a new page, even though it's the same page of Gemara.
Okay, very similar concept. Yeah, very similar. And we could debate. They both have milas. On one hand, you're training them to see the whole page, see what they're holding. Like this, it clarifies 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and whatever works for your talmidim, and for you is definitely givaldic. And then this same piece is going to go on the worksheet, right? And this is the professionally graphic artist designed version that we have in our books. But before that, I had a much more simple Rebbe-made version of the same worksheet with just a plain white background. But you saw the same shtickle of Gemara right on the page. And for homework, the kids are going to be able to read it right here, right? If it's hard enough for them to find the Gemara in my class, how many of them at home, when they have to chazer the Gemara, how many of them are going to be able to have the wherewithal to take out a Gemara, find like this? The Gemara they're supposed to chazer is printed right there on their workbook, and then there'll be these skills to break it down, which we'll get to shortly. But this is the idea, to break down the amud. The amud of Gemara is so busy, and by breaking it down, we really help the kids zero in on what they're doing. All right, now we get to what's probably the biggest topic, and that is the fact that Gemara is abstract logic. It's a new way to think. You've never had to think this way before, and how do you work with that? I'm going to ask a tiny favor. I know the books are visually incredibly engaging, but if I could just ask, if we could look at them afterwards this way, because I just want to give this over here. We have the abstract logic, and you have to break it down. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that everybody in the class knows the background information of the Gemara. And I don't need to spend too much time on this. I think that most of us probably understand that very often a discussion of Gemara is going to assume some prior knowledge that not every elementary school age kid has. And therefore it's very important that information be given before you start the Gemara. And that goes back to the fact that, like I said, multitasking has been found to be a myth. So when you're supplying that information midstream and then expecting the kids at the same time to be able to incorporate it into the Shakla V'Tarya, you're telling them to do two things at once, which they can't do. And this includes learning any freestanding parts first. If there's a brisa, depending on the nature of the brisa, before you learn the Gemara, teach the brisa. There's a brisa in the Gemara. Say, Rabbi said we're going to learn a brisa, and teach the brisa the way you would teach a Mishnah. And don't be afraid to spend 20 minutes teaching a brisa. Or if there were 45 minutes, depending on... Teach it like you would teach it if it was a limud bifnei atzmo. This brisa is the limud. Teach the brisa. Then later, when you're going to bring it back and explain how this brisa is a raya, they're not going to get confused. Wait, what are we proving here? You know this brisa. You know we were discussing this in the Gemara. Do you see how this brisa proves that point? You're only doing one thing at once. First you know the brisa, then you incorporate the brisa. You're not multitasking, right? So and I'm going to show some examples of this a little bit later. The same thing is when the Gemara quotes a Mishnah. The Gemara quotes a Mishnah, teach the Mishnah, learn the Mishnah, know the Mishnah. Then, if the Gemara has a little story that's made to prove a point, Ki ha de Rabbi Yosef, that he did such and such, right? First teach the story. Rabbi say, we're going to learn a short little story about Rabbi Yosef. He went to... Okay, now let's come back to our sugya. Okay, we put the sugya on the side. We learned the story of Rabbi Yosef. Now we're going to come back. We're going to learn the sugya. Can you see what the relevance of the story of Rabbi Yosef is to our sugya?
Just wondering, when you learn these separate pieces, you're learning it outside, or are you actually going inside and say, okay, here's the Bryce, we're going to learn this as Dr. B'nei, or do you just tell them over,
So the question was, if I understand correctly, when we learn the freestanding material in advance of the Gemara, do we learn it inside or just conceptually outside? And I usually do it inside. They're going to have to learn to teach and read this brisa anyway. So why do it twice? Right? So, and again, if I would only teach it outside and then the reading of the inside came at the same time as the Gemara, I'm weiter expecting them to multitask. Learn how to read the brisa while also incorporating it into our sugya. That's still two things at once.
Not always will it be over here. And when the Gemara says the Reish and the Sefer, so you'll go back to wherever the mission is, wherever the Bryce is, and teach the entire thing.
If it's relevant, yeah. And if it means spending an extra day on this piece, I'm fine with that.
On your board, or are you giving them sheets on?
You know what? In the 2.5 daf that I teach, that's not really so negeya. What would I do? You know, I would do whatever worked best for my talmidim, and that's of course what we all should do. Oh, and the same thing applies to psukim. You know, there's one piece of Gemara in Tfilas HaShachar where the Gemara has a brisa which quotes 6 psukim. Right? Because we learn out Shachris Mincha Marav, a pasuk by the office, 6 psukim all throughout Tanakh. Mamish, turn to beam ksuvim. Rabbi Isai, come and talmidim. Right now, you know what we're going to do? Rebbe is going to teach you 6 random psukim. What? Yeah, we're going to learn 6 random psukim. And I'll spend 2-3 minutes on each one. And I'll give them background. You know, there was a great Navi, Yirmiyahu Navi. And he lived at the end of Bayis Rishon. But boys, I have to tell you, Yirmiyahu. By the way, you see the sign on the wall where we have the Svarim Tanakh? Yes, that Yirmiyahu Navi. The one who wrote Sefer Yirmiyahu. Right? You see it in Nevi'im Achronim, second one of them. Okay. He lived at the end of the first base on Mikdash. Oh, Rabbi's telling us a story. And he had a very difficult life. Hashem gave him the shlichus to tell the Bnei Yisrael to do tshuva, and they never listened to him. Rabbi said they even threw him in prison. Things got so bad that Hashem even told Yirmiyahu Hanavi to stop davening for Klal Yisrael. Can you imagine how bad that was? And let's learn this pasuk. V'ata. And you, and mamish like a pasuk, like we were learning a pasuk in Chumash. Al tispalal ba'ara amazeh. Right? And we read that pasuk that the Gemara quotes. And that was 3-4 minutes. Now 3-4 minutes of Gemara lesson is very precious. But it's kedai. Right? And then we do the same thing for the other 5 psukim the Gemara quotes.
If you're only teaching 2 words in like a day, how do you teach that Gemara every single day?
Well, we learn 2 vocabulary words. Not every word in the Gemara is going to be in that vocabulary. You know, we learn 100 words over the year. But right? So then they know those 6 psukim they already know. Now we're going to say, okay, Rabbi Isai, now we're going to have the raya, right? We had a machlokes where the tefillos came from. Now we're going to have the raya that the tefillos came from the avos. And here's a brisa that, right? And we learn through the brisa. And they have in their minds that the brisa is establishing a link between the avos and the tefillos. But what they're not doing at that moment is learning the taich of the psukim. Because that they already have. Right? One thing at a time. And it's a different world. Because if you didn't do that in advance, and you're trying to establish the link between the avos and the tefillos, while at the same time teaching this pasuk from Sefer Yirmiyahu, the kids are not know what's flying. Right? It's all over the place. What? So who established? Was it Yirmiyahu who davened? Was it Yitzchak who davened? Right? It just, and what's happening in the pasuk? One thing at a time, and it works. It works. The kids will grasp it. They'll know it. I just spent a half hour of my day teaching 6 psukim. Okay, but you gave them the skills, right? All Gemara, with the exception of Agadata, which is a different limud, but all Gemara can be divided into steps of logic, and this is the cornerstone of the way I teach Gemara in my class. This is the cornerstone of this beautiful book that you see. All Gemara can and should be divided into steps of logic, and each step of logic fits into a category. And I'll run through them very quickly. Right? Here they are. Now, if somebody wants to compose a slightly different list, I'm not going to fight them on it. The point is not the specifics of what the labels are. The point is that Gemara is not this big, excuse me for saying, blob of back and forth. It's a very organized sequence of steps, of logical steps, right? It could be a memra, a kushya, teretz, raya, dechiyah, she'ela, tshuva, maskana. Okay, now very quickly, a memra. What's a memra? A memra is an informational statement. It has no agenda. It's not approving anything. It's not answering anything. It's not asking anything. Here, this is information that you should know. Enjoy. Right? Tfilas hashachar ad chatzos, Rabbi Yehuda Omer ad arba shos. That's a memra. It's a statement. Nothing more, nothing less. We're not trying to prove something with that. We're not trying to answer something. Here it is. Right? Right? Yish lo midas, Abaya Omer, Eloi havi yish, Rava Omer havi yish. It's an informational statement. Just information you should know. And that could be a Mishnah, a Brisa, a statement of an Amora. And very often, usually a Maimer will start off a Sugya. Then there are Kushyos. There are many ways to, excuse me, to teach a Kushya. Some people like the word difficulty, objection. My taich in my Gemara Milim, very child-friendly taich, a question that something doesn't make sense. That's how the kids teach it. Now, when they're 30, I don't want them saying a kushya is a question that something doesn't make sense. Then, at some point they're going to say it's a challenge, it's an objection, it's a difficulty, however you want to say it. But for a kid to understand it, a kushya is a question that something doesn't make sense. And it's either based on logic or it's based on a statement of a Tana. And back in Introduction to Gemara, we already learned, they already have this concept cold, that an Amora can't argue with a Tana. So if you have a statement on a Tana that's keneged an Amora, that's a kushya. That makes no sense. He can't do it. And then, if you want to know that you understand the kushya, every kushya has two components. You have a kushya, you better be able to tell me two things. The target and the attack. The target, what is the thing I'm challenging? What is the thing that I'm claiming makes no sense? And the attack, what makes no sense about it? Tell me why it makes no sense, right? If I want to know, you understand the kushya? Yes, Rabbi, I understand the kasha. Okay, what's the target? The target is the fact that the Mishnah said that tfilas hashachar ad chatzos. And what's the attack? The attack is that the Brisa says klar that you have to daven right by Hanetz Achama. Right? So it's a target and attack. It's neat. It's not out there. It's not like rant. It's a neat thing. There's an objection here. We're saying this makes no sense because of that. Kushya. Teretz answers the kushya. Usually by correcting a misconception. You had a havamina. You know why you thought it made no sense? Because you incorrectly believed X, Y, and Z. You incorrectly thought that the Mishnah, that the Brisa that said that you have to daven Hadar Tzachama was the halacha talking to everybody. No. The maskana is that it's only speaking for the Vasikin. Kitan Yahi Vasikin. Right? Do you understand the teretz? Yes, Rabbi, I understand the teretz. Okay. Tell me what was the havamina and what's the maskana? We had a kasha because we thought X, Y, and Z, right? A raya, the secret is that a raya and a kushya are really the same exact thing, just coming from a different angle. A raya is just the reverse of a kushya. A kushya saying, hey, this makes no sense because of X, Y, and Z. A raya says this must be true because of X, Y, and Z, right? So a raya proves to something based on the same thing, either logic or the statement of a Tana, it could be a Mishnah or a Brisa. And again, it'll have the target, the thing that we are proving. What are we proving to be correct? And how are we proving it to be correct? A dechiyah says, whoa, what you thought was a raya is not really a raya. Right? Now, it doesn't attack the original statement, and this is a distinction that takes some time. The kids have a hard time distinguishing between a dechiyah and a kushya. Right? Oh, so we're saying that it's really wrong? No, we're not saying it's wrong. We're just saying that what you thought was a raya is not really a raya. And we'll tell you why it's not a raya, because these two cases are not analogous. You thought they were the same and you could compare them. You can't really compare them. Or various other forms of a dechiyah. Then there's a she'ela. And we spend quite a bit of time distinguishing a she'ela from a kushya. If a kushya is a question that something doesn't make any sense, the taich of she'ela is a question asking for information. Right? To be shoel means to request. A she'ela means, I don't know something. Usually, what's the halacha? It's not an attack. I don't have a problem with something you said. Right? I just want to know something. Can you please tell me? Right? And the kids very quickly learn to distinguish between the two. It takes one good lesson and then a couple of times of it coming up in the Gemara. The first time it comes up in the Gemara, what type of question is this? Is it a kushya or a she'ela? By the third, fourth time, it's klar. It's klar. If it's asking me for information, it's a she'ela.
The Gemara is a havman, and the Gemara comes back that no. What do you call that part? That's the rejection?
It depends in what purpose. Usually that's for a teretz. There was a kasha, the kasha is based on a havamina. Why did you ask a kasha? Because you thought this, right? It could be a dechia also. It's a teretz. The teretz is, your whole kasha was based on the following havamina. Let me tell you how it really is. Yeah, but we don't point it out until the teretz. We point out the havamina in the teretz. And then looking back at the kasha, it becomes apparent that the kasha was based on the havamina.
The Gemara sometimes comes to the havman. It's right there. You don't have to wait till the teretz. That's the single member.
Or another raya or something. But so you're right. Where it says Mayalav, the Gemara is giving away the thing that we're going to attack, right? Or Salkadai Dechamin, right? Sometimes the Gemara gives away the Havamina even in the Kasha, right? The Gemara tells you, I assume this, so therefore I have a Kasha, setting up the obvious teretz to say, no, that's not really true. And Echanami does that sometimes, but if it's written into the Kasha, then it's written into the Kasha. But the step of Gemara is still called the Kasha. A tshuva, and it happens to be in my classroom, I don't use the term tshuva. That's one shortcut I take. All answers are a teretz. Right? I may mention to them to the fact that, by the way, the answer to a she'ela is not really a teretz, it's really a tshuva. But I figure this is one concession I'm going to make. All answers are a teretz. If you know the different kashas, different types of questions, it matters less if you know the names of the correct answers, because you understand what's happening here anyway. But, if a Rebbe wants to use the term tshuva, matov manoim. And very simply, it supplies the requested information and usually gives you a source. You say, Toshma, it's this way, and Detanya or something, right? Very simple. Then there's a maskana, the conclusion of the Gemara, not to be confused with the havamina maskana type of maskana, right? It's a different use of the same word. And either the Gemara is going to give a halacha, or accept a raya, it's going to say shma mina, or it'll say tiyufta, reject something, or teku, right? Which means it stands as a kushya, right? It stands as a she'ela. We all learned teku stands for tishbi yitaretz kushios v'bayos. It's a cute zug. I don't believe that's actually the taich of the word. The word teku, which is used in context often also, it means it stands. And it means it stands as a she'ela, it stands unresolved. The Rashi Tevis is a cute zug, and it's beautiful. The kids learn it, and it inspires hope for Eliyahu Navi. But just as an aside, I don't believe that that's actually pshat in the word.
On the topic of misnomers, why do many Rabbi teach when Rashi says bitmiya? Why do they teach it as bitmiya and they read the word bitmiya with like they read it in a way of surprise? Isn't Rashi just saying bitmiya? Read it with tmiya, read it with wonderment. Read this word with a question. Right, read it bitmiya as opposed to b'nichusa. Does not everyone learn bitmiya?
You're saying what Rashi's saying. Teach the kid what Rashi's saying.
You're asking me why it's pronounced bitmiya as if the base was part of the shoresh. When you're getting to dikduk, you have to be careful, because you get me onto a soapbox, I might not come down. So I'm gonna avoid that question. In my curriculum, in the book that we have. So the example I give for bitmiyah is, or bitmiyah, whatever, is, the Rebbe and the Talmud had the following conversation. David, where's your homework? A dog ate it. And the Rebbe says back, a dog ate it? I said, now if you just read the Rebbe's response back, plain, where's your homework? A dog ate it. A dog ate it. Right? Oh, so then, right? So the Rebbe is being maskim. Okay, you're excused. The dog ate it. Right? So, the kid, that's a very good example for, these age kids. They chap. No, the tone of voice means everything. So we definitely focus on that as to why people, whatever. I said my piece on that. Okay.
These things, you teach them in your knowledge right now? Or you teach
Most of them. Yeah. Yeah, maybe even all of them.
They know what these pieces are before you start.
Yeah. So the last thing we mentioned was the lack of clarity, or the potential lack of clarity. And the best thing I could say, besides for everything else that we're going to go into, take it slow. Take the derech aruka shahi kitzara. I can be made that Mesifta boys, Beis Medrash boys, have come back to me and said, Rebbe, the foundation in Gemara that I got in your class, the Gemara meal and everything, it has made a difference till today. I have a klarkeit and shakli v'tari that my chaverim don't. I question if very many Talmidim come back to a Rebbe and say, Rebbe, the fact that we did 12 lot in 5th grade instead of 5 made such a difference to me today. I question if that happens. There's so many years ahead, Emirat Hashem, to learn Gemara, if we start them off right. If we sacrifice an extra few blot now to take it la'at. Let them taste it. It's so sweet. It's so geschmack. If we don't pressure them and rush, weiter, before it's clear in their minds, and they feel, what? We're going to get so much more. So that's the best thing I could say. Take it slow. What's going to have the lasting impact? The other thing that you're going to do for clarity is you're going to give a roadmap. Boys, today we're starting a brand new sugya. This sugya is going to have 12 steps. That's right. And it's going to start with a memra. And now, after we learn the memra, we're going to start reading step number 2. And step number 2, I'm going to give you guys a chance to figure out what type of step it is. Right? Each lesson, 1 or 2 steps. Maybe after you've been doing it a while, if it's easy, you want to put 4, 5, 6 steps in a lesson. If you feel that but only as much as they're taking it easily. Once it's pressured, once they're being rushed to move on to the second thing before the first step, once they're not sure, that roadmap, they don't have that picture of where they're holding and where they're going, it's too much, right? It's diminishing marginal returns. You're gonna lose more than you gain. There's no hurry. Mirza Hashem, they'll learn Gemara for 50 years, 100 years. Give a few years, a few dafim less now, they'll more than make it up later because they're going to have an enthusiasm, they're going to have a cheshek to learn it. You bring out confidence by showing them what they already know. And that includes teaching them to anticipate the type of step. Now we have about 12 minutes left. So I'm going to make a bakasha. For the next 12 minutes, can everyone here be a 5th grader? Put yourself in 5th grade mindset. I'm not going to ask if you're smarter than a 5th grader, but if we could just, okay. So I say that because I don't want anyone to think that Chas v'Shalom I'm speaking down to anybody. I just want to demonstrate the way some of these things would come out in a 5th grade class. So we saw this one on the board already. We'll start with it here. This is the beginning of a sugya. Now I've heard from Rabbeim who teach this parak Tfilas HaShachar. I skip the sugya of ad v'ad bichlal. It's too hard. The kids don't get it. I skip it. I have to say that, and it's not just the thing you say, but it's my favorite sugya the whole year. The kids love it. It's so geschmack because it's done. Okay, so all right, 5th graders. Rabbi Sai, we're starting a new sugya. This may or may not be. You guys are going to tell me. You may find this to be the most geschmack sugi we've done yet. That'll be up to you to decide. Me? I'll tell you my opinion afterwards. You're going to tell me if this is the most geschmack sugi we've had yet. In a week from now, I'm going to ask you. Okay? Now, you notice, we start off right away. You remember, before that word Rabbi, at the end of Shir Tes Vav, there was 2 dots. Yeah? Yeah? And you see right here 2 more dots. So you have Rabbi, Yehuda, Omer. 6 words. Rabbi say, why are there 6 words that have 2 dots before it and 2 dots after it? No? Anybody? Binyamin? It's a member, that's true. But not every member has 2 dots before and 2 dots after. Why do we have 2 dots before and 2 dots after? Oh, gewaldig! We're going on to the next piece of the Mishnah. The piece of the Mishnah we were discussing till now. We have finished discussing. That sugya is in our pocket. Now we're starting a new segment of the Mishnah. And Binyamin told us that it's going to be a memra for Shtetzach because it's a piece of the Mishnah. Okay. So we already know step 1. We don't know what step 1 says. We didn't read it yet. But we know what kind of step it is. We know where it comes from. Let's go. Let's read step number 1. Rabbi, Yehuda, Rabbi, okay, good. Step 1. Are we clear? Good? Everybody has it? Givaldi. Step 2. Raise your hand if you can tell me. I'm not reading it for you guys. Raise your hand if you can tell me what type of step is step number 2. Right? Oh, Shloimi. It's a she'ela. A she'ela? Are you sure? Yeah. Really sure? Yeah, good. How do you know it's a she'ela? Because it says, Ibaya lahu. Oh, you mean, and we had Ibaya lahu an Amad ago. You remember that Ibaya lahu means it was a, 2 vocabulary words also. It was a she'ela to them. Beautiful. You're absolutely right. Step 2 is a she'ela. Now here's the $1 million questions. And no, boys, you don't really get $1 million. Here's the $1 million question. Where does step 2 end? Where does step 2 end? Rabbi? No? By Bichlal. Okay, how do you know? Because right after that it says Toshma. And Toshma means that's already the Raya. Gewaldig. Here's a Rabbi dollar. Gewaldig. Toshma is always the beginning of a Raya. That means here's the end of the She'elah. Did we learn step 2 yet? No. But do you guys know exactly where it starts and stops? Yeah. Right. And by the way, I've spent like 3 minutes on this and I haven't taught anything here. Yeah, right? But is it Kedai? Right? Do I have are the kids engaged right now? Are they getting skills? Are they picking up the framework and the structure of the Gemara that they're going to always remember? Of course, of course. Now I want you to look at one other thing. If you had to break this she'ela in half, where would you do it? What word breaks it in half? Oy. You got it. Oh, oy. What does that mean? Everybody? Or. So we already now know the Gemara is asking a she'ela. We haven't learned this yet. We're asking a she'ela. Is it these 3 words? Or is it these 4 words? You already see the whole structure here. We don't know what those words mean yet. But you know exactly what's happening. And the secret is, the 50 other times they're going to have it, they also know what's happening. I didn't just teach them this. Right? I taught them the next 50 times they're going to have it also. You know, the mashal I give is, you teach someone to bake a cherry pie. The next day they have to bake a blueberry pie. If they have no idea what to do, you didn't teach them how to bake a cherry pie very effectively. If you taught them how to bake the cherry pie effectively, and then they're told to bake a blueberry pie, they'll be able to just make the substitution. right? And that's what's going on here. This structure, they're going to have it 50 times. So did I spend 15 minutes of class without even starting the Gemara yet? Of course I did. Was it Kedai? Of course it was. No, but it's a word that they've had in Mishnayos. It's just a common word that they've encountered in their education many times. It's there. It might not be Vayomer, but I've never found a class that, Rubam Kekulam didn't know that word.
If they didn't, so you make it vocabulary.
Right. The truth is, and we've had it in the Gemara. It is on Amud Aleph. It may not be a vocabulary word, but it appears in the Mishnah. But they have it in Mishnayos. So I'm telling you, what I just demonstrated right here, this is exactly what happened a couple of months ago in my class. The way I just taught this right now, this was verbatim, well, not verbatim, but the same exact way that I did it in my class. And they were able to. I said, because I told them, where does the step end? That means I'm telling you, I don't expect you to do something that's impossible. I'm telling you there's a clue here. So they'll skim ahead till they see a road sign. They can do it. And especially, the first time, they might not be able to do it. But if you point it out the first time, again, this is the second time they had this sequence. Right? We had, in Amud before, we had the same exact sequence of words. But I'm reinforcing it every single time. So that they get used to the fact, Ibai Elahu.
I have a side question. What do you do if like 3 or 4 boys in your class learn this Gemara with your fathers already? Do you teach it?
So, do I still teach it?
Or are they in class? What do you do with these kids?
What do I do with those kids? So that's really a separate, that's a closely question in education.
They don't know the skills, they just know the Gemara.
Right. Right. So, and the truth is, they don't know the Gemara either. To be frank about it. They may know what's about and have some ideas, but they don't really have a Clarkite in the Gemara, right? When the fathers come to me and say, "Oh, you're starting the Gemara, which parak? Let me learn ahead with my son." I beg them, b'chol lashon shel bakasha, to not do it. I say, "I have a great idea. We're learning the 4th parak of brachos. Do the 5th, do the 1st, right?" So, I find that it doesn't end up being a big problem.
That can be helpful when you're trying to get the kids involved. You have somebody that knows a little bit. You can say,
How are the weaker third, the weaker group doing when you're giving this kind of lesson? Are they with you?
100%. Now, if there's a kid who is not focused when we're doing that, it's not because he's weak. Because nothing I did here is complex. Even the strong kids, the chiddush is that the strong kids are pulled in. And they're pulled in because it's so engaging. And of course there has to be enthusiasm. You have to have your kishkas into it. But it's structure, it's logic. What's going to happen next? But nothing here happened. If a kid is not engaged here, it's not an ability problem. There might be an emotional issue going on. There might, there's other things at play. Am I going to say every kid is paying attention? No. But, if there's 25 kids in the class, and we're doing that whole thing, 23 of them at least are focused and locked in, right? So those 1 or 2, you have to deal with on a pratyistic basis. And again, so we'll go. But that's the point. I'm not in a rush. If I was in a rush, what I would say? I would say, Rabbi Sai, we're starting a new sugya. Okay, Ibai Elahu. The Gemara has the Gemara has a shaila, right? Okay, now let me tell you what Ad Bichlal is and what Ad Bichlal, and I would explain. I might give a very good hesber, but it's just part of this big mass. I'm not pointing out the structure. They're not getting skills for the future, and there's going to be much less motivation, much less engagement, because what? It's just endless. There's no rhyme or reason for what's coming, right? Weiter and Shas. Okay, I don't want to go weiter and Shas. I want to know what we're doing. So that's, right? This is a sugya I just was working on this week, right? So again, okay. So the Gemara told a story with Rav. He went to the house of Geniva and he davened, and one of the things that happened was that Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba was davening behind Rav. And the Gemara said, Shema mino that mispalel Talmud achorei Rabbi. You see here that a Talmud is allowed to daven behind his Rebbe. And of course, the kids are, well, why wouldn't a Talmud be able to? Okay, you'll find out. Okay. Boys, we're starting Shirchov tests. I am not going to tell you what step we're up to. You're going to tell me what kind of step this is. Let's see who can figure it out. Rabbi Yirmiyah. Okay, that's easy enough to teach. And Rabbi Yirmiyah. Heichi, vocabulary word. How? Ovid, vocabulary word. He did. Hachi, vocabulary word. Like this. Okay, let's teach it together. Rabbi Yirmiyah. Heichi, Ovid, Hachi. How did he do this? Rabbi Sai. What type of step is this? Little wait time. 3 hands shoot up right away. We're not calling anyone. Give another 5-6 seconds. Let it sink in. By this time, 14 hands are up. It's a kushya. It's a kushya. Why do you say so? Now here, there's no telltale keyword. It didn't say meisvei. It didn't say one of those words that always means a kushya. How do you know it's a kushya? Because it's saying, how did he do this? That means we're saying there's a problem with what he did. Right? This is logic already working. Now it's not a rote skill. Now you got to start thinking. But they could do it. Right? If you know what they do it. And then we'll go through it. And then, of course, there's a brisa here, so we'll learn it separately. We'll apply it back in. This is the very next Gemara. The Gemara, the teretz of the Gemara here, the Gemara said that Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba was a Talmud Chaver of Rav. He wasn't just a Talmud. He was a Talmud Chaver. So, of course, we explain what that means and why that makes a difference. This piece here, I just taught this on Thursday. So yeah, here's a great example of taking something freestanding out. I said, boys, before we learn the shir, there was a conversation that happened between Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba and Rav. Let's learn that conversation. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba said 2 words, and Rav said back 2 words. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba said, let's see, Omar lei. I put a line here, cutting off, right? This is on my whiteboard. Put a line here. Omar lei Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba l'Rav. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba said, lei is a vocabulary word to him, to Rav. Mi badlos. And we'll spend a minute. What does that mean? Mi badlos. Oh, and talking, one kid said, wait, that has the shirish like Havdalah, separate. Very good. It means, did he say, now that you davened early davening on Friday, you davened early Shabbos, did you have to separate from doing malacha? Okay, we'll spend a couple of minutes on that because it's a concept. What's the question? Of course you do. We all know that if you make early Shabbos, you have to stop malacha. Yeah, because that's, you always done it, right? But you hear, on one hand, it's not Shabbos yet. It's still light. On the other hand, you daven. Okay, so we got that done. Let's see what Rav said back. Omar lei, vocabulary. He said to him, ein, vocabulary word. Yes, bodilna. I separated. That one I have to give them. Bodilna, I separated. So, and we chazer over. What did Rabbi Yirmiyah say? What did Rav say? Right? Okay, we got the conversation klar. We spent 5-6 minutes. The conversation is klar. But now look what the Gemara points out. V'lo Omar, and he didn't say, mi bod los. Did you, mi bod ilmar. Did the master separate? He said, mi bod los, did you separate? He didn't say, right, what did he say? And what didn't he say? And we'll chaser that over a couple times. What did Rabbi Yirmiyah say? And what didn't he say? Boys, what's the Gemara's point? What kind of step is this? What is the Gemara pointing out when it says that Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba said, did you separate? And a bunch of the boys are going to chop it. It's a raya that he's a Talmud Chaver. Gewaldig. And then we go into a regular Talmud would never say, did you separate? He would say, did the master separate? It's so clear. And the kids are loving every minute of it. No one's asking to go out to the bathroom. It's so enjoyable. It's so exciting. It's geschmack. Everyone likes having their mind stimulated in the right way. Right? It's engaging. It's alive. And I can get it. I can succeed at it. It makes sense. Everything fits in just right. And when you teach like this, the Gemara is so exciting. Of course, a little hype also doesn't hurt. This is hanging on my wall. This is actually very high. This is the top of the whiteboard. Right? So about a month and a half before we start Gemara, we... right? And this is, I don't know if you see the picture. These are tear-off numbers, right? 44 days, and every day I forget to rip off the number. And the whole davening, And I know what he wants. After davening, Rebbe, what? Of course, I play it out. What? You didn't take down the number. Oh, you're right. And with a flourish, 43 days till we start Gemara. And it's just something, that's just an outside thing. It just makes it exciting. It makes it, by the time the day gets there, they're bursting. We're in the teens, only 19 days left, right? It's so geschmack. Very quickly about the book that you see on the chairs around you. This is a project of Bright Beginnings. It was developed in our yeshiva, and of course, Bright Beginnings is headed by Rabbi Yakov Horowitz. Volume 1, which is the book here, is available. Volume 2, which will go until the second Mishnah of Tfilas HaShachar, is scheduled for release by September. Please come visit our booth. And this is my contact information. I have an offer for everybody here. If there's any particular piece of Gemara that you'd like to schmooze about, how would we break it down into steps? What are the key words that we can pull out? I'm here for Shabbos. By this time, I assume everyone's here for Shabbos. So please come over to me even before Shabbos, after Shabbos, with the Gemara, and I'll be happy to schmooze. This shtickle, how do you break it apart? And we can talk about it together. We can come out with something. What are the skills? What are the keywords? We can pull it out. I'd love to talk about it. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for listening, and a good Shabbos.
Rabbi, if you're kind enough.